Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for today, December 22nd, 2021. Today we're going to take up the topic of how do you make a break from the continuation of endless wars, the costly in terms of human lives, in terms of potential for the future. How do we break out of that? It's apparent that the leaders of the transatlantic and NATO countries seem to be stuck in a mentality that they believe that they alone possess the power and the right to impose the conditions of peace. And by peace, they mean essentially that the rest of the world is subservient to their unilateral desires. This is what the rules-based order is. Now, instead of accepting that, let's face some facts. First, the U.S. should have never been involved in endless wars in the first place. The question of what happened on 9/11 is still not fully clear, but it was used by the military-industrial complex to set up a new era of wars, of spying, of top-down control, of destruction of the idea of national sovereignty. This was of no benefit to the people of the United States or the NATO countries. It didn't improve global security. In fact, it worsened it. And the political leaders of both parties in the United States and most of the political parties in Europe as well are either too committed to war and the destruction that's incumbent in war, or they lack a vision to break free of the geopolitical controls that dominate international policy and strategy. Let's face a second fact. The transatlantic powers lost a war. Well, that's a reality. Why compound that by committing an atrocity, adopting a policy which may kill millions of people by starvation and lack of medication and water and electricity, and unleash a devastating refugee crisis? Now, who are the victims of this? It's the children of Afghanistan that people like Blinken and Boris Johnson and the leaders in Germany claim they're trying to help. How do you help the children? By starving them because of your anger at losing a war. This makes not only no sense, but it's actually committing war crimes. Now, instead of then moving seamlessly into the next war, and this is the third fact to face, that we're headed toward a confrontation with nuclear powers, Russia and China, the so-called pivot to Asia, the containment of Russia, in the aftermath of losing the war in Central Asia. Why not cooperate with Russia and China? Why not work together to resolve the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan and use that as a model for not just overcoming the immediate danger, but of demonstrating the goodwill and the potential of building new economies, of allowing a leapfrog from poverty and backwardness into the future. That's something that could be done easily and would benefit the whole world. Now, interestingly, on Monday, 46 congressmen wrote a letter to President Biden asking that he unfreeze the more than $9 billion of Afghan funds that are being held by the Federal Reserve and Western banks. This is money that belongs to the people of Afghanistan. It's a point where we're at a point where the currency is being devalued daily in Afghanistan. People have no money to live. The central bank has no money, but they actually are owed $9 billion being held in Western banks. Free that. Give them the capability to participate in their own salvation. Now, the potential for expanding on that is great. Over the last weekend, the Organization of Islamic Countries held a meeting in Islamabad, Pakistan, and committed themselves to providing short-term humanitarian aid and longer-term development aid. And they called upon the United States and Western countries to participate with them. The potential for working with Afghanistan's neighbors is great. And the the medium for this could be the extended troika, which is Russia, China, the United States, and Pakistan. Again, instead of war and containment, work together, carry out a policy which would undo, maybe not undo, but overcome the damages that have been done by these endless wars, which have inflicted incredible human consequences on the people not only of Afghanistan, but Iraq, of Syria, of Libya, and other countries. Now, think about the time of year it is and step back for a moment and reflect on this. What does Christmas mean? It's a time for generosity, a time for forgiveness, a time for love, and for addressing oneself to the needs of those who are less fortunate. This is a long-standing tradition in Western thinking, often forgotten. The question is, are the leaders in the transatlantic world too deeply embedded in what President Putin calls the post-Christian era to reflect such love of mankind in their policies? There's no reason that the children of Afghanistan must pay for the geopolitical crimes inflicted upon them by the Western powers, who unilaterally decided to stay in a war for 20 years of no benefit to anyone, in fact, of great negative consequence for the whole world. This is a time of year for reflection, a time of year where one's better nature should take over and reject the idea of punishment, of making someone pay for something. And what are they paying for? What was the crime of the people of Afghanistan? The crime is they're located in a part of the world which the British Empire determined would be a key point or a pivot point in the extension of British geopolitical and financial supremacy, going back to the middle of the 19th century, the so-called Great Game. The 5-year-old child in Afghanistan who today is shivering in a tent in sub-zero weather with no food, why should they suffer because of a doctrine dreamt up by the lords of finance of the City of London? This is a time where we have to open our hearts to humanity. And there is a plan for doing that. Helga Zepp-LaRouche of the Schiller Institute has proposed what she calls Operation Ibn Sina, named after one of the great humanist thinkers and doctors from the 11th and 12th century. He's famous among medical professionals for the documents he wrote and for the work he's done. There's even an Ibn Sina hospital today in Kabul. But the idea of Operation Ibn Sina is that the world joined together to take on the humanitarian task of saving the children and the people of Afghanistan by adopting a policy based on the best of the ecumenical principles of mankind. This is something that could be done. The fact that even 46 congressmen joined hands to call for this is interesting. The Organization of Islamic Countries has called for this. The Chinese and the Russians see this as an opportunity for peaceful cooperation rather than war. So I'm appealing to our viewers to take seriously this Christmas season of acting in the interests of all mankind and insisting that your congressman or your congresswoman support this effort to unfreeze the funds and begin the process of reconstructing Afghanistan. Thanks for joining me today. I'll see you again tomorrow.